My name is Arden Crowell, 35 years old. It started as a routine checkup, the kind you wedge between grant revisions and a lab run. I'd been tired for months, chalking it up to fluorescent lights and too much coffee, a nagging ache in my side like a door left slightly ajar. The doctor's voice went careful, the way people talk to glass. Arden, your kidneys are failing. You need a transplant, and soon. Numbers on the page rearranged my life into a countdown. $100,000. No insurance through our little startup. Not yet. Not with our burn rate. I walked to my car like I'd borrowed my own body and didn't know where to return it. Outside the clinic, I called my dad first, my fingers slipping on the screen. Hey, Dad, I need to talk. It's serious. A rustle of voices behind him, clinking glasses. Arden, now's not great, Dennis said, distracted. We're thick into Gina's engagement party planning. I told him anyway. Transplant. 100,000. The timeline folding in on itself. Silence, and then a tone I knew from his restaurant floor when a shipment was short. That's a lot of money. Let me talk to your mother. No. So sorry. No. We'll figure it out. I called my mom. Joyce's voice came tight as a corset. Arden, sweetheart, we're in the middle of 100 things. You know what this wedding means. I repeated the words, kidney failure, transplant, 100,000, trying to sound like a scientist instead of a frightened daughter. We've already committed 200,000 to the wedding, she said, as if that were an answer to a different question. Caterers, venue, band, it's set. A chair scraped in the background, then a soft murmur. Joyce lowered her voice. We can't pull money out of thin air. I swallowed the heat in my throat. Out of thin air, I echoed, staring at an anemic palm tree in the clinic parking lot as if it might offer shade from this. By evening, I had a plan I didn't like. Show up in person, make them see me. Their house was lit like a fairground. White bulbs strung over the lawn, the air fat with smoke and sugar. The Newman BBQ empire was as much theater as food. Dennis working the crowd, Joyce smiling like hospitality were a brand she could wear. I parked my dented sedan among sleek SUVs and walked in clutching the doctor's letter like a visa to a country my family had never granted me. Inside, laughter hit like heat. A band tuned up by the patio. The buffet glistened, brisket lacquered to a dark shine, cornbread in neat squares. Gina floated through guests in a sequined dress, a champagne flute held like a scepter. Her fiancé leaned at her ear, then glanced toward Dennis, a quick, measuring look that made something inside me go cold. Near the bar, a man I didn't recognize stood apart, sober amid the cheer, watching my parents with the cool attention of an auditor. When Joyce caught his eye, her smile thinned and vanished, then snapped back on. I filed that away without knowing why. Mom! I found her near the chafing dishes, steam kissing her wrist. I need to talk, now. She didn't turn fully, face angled for onlookers. Not a good time, she whispered. We're celebrating your sister. I told her anyway. The words felt like instruments, precise and sharp. Failing kidneys, transplant, 100,000. Her eyes flicked over my shoulder to the crowd. Arden, we've committed 200,000 already, she said. You know how these things work. Deposits, contracts. It's a done deal. My mouth tasted like metal. My life isn't a vendor you can't reschedule, I said softly. She adjusted a serving spoon, hand trembling just once. I found Dennis next, mid-joke with a table of men whose laughter stopped when I appeared. Dad, please. I held out the letter. He read the letterhead, then skimmed and stopped, jaw tightening. Your sister's wedding is in 6 weeks, he said, the way he'd say a rib is underdone. We don't have that kind of cash lying around. We're stretched. Behind him, the man by the bar lifted his glass to no one and continued not drinking. You're stretched? I said. Your dining rooms are full. Dennis's smile went managerial. You've always been the independent one, Arden. You'll find a way. Arden! Gina's voice slid across the room, bright and sticky. She swept up, guests orbiting her. You picked tonight to do whatever this is? I told her exactly what this was. For the first time, her smile faltered. Then she laughed, a crisp, deliberate sound. You've always made a point of not needing us, she said. Now you do, and it's my night? She turned to her fiancé, amused. She wants 100 grand. Tonight. A ripple of chuckles. One woman muttered, maybe she should have saved, and someone else tittered the way people titter when they want to be on the side of power. I felt my legs move before I decided to kneel. The polished floor was cool against my skin. The world narrowed until it was just my breath and the letter crumpling in my hand. Please, I said, to no one and everyone. I need $100,000 to live. For a heartbeat, the room held still, music pausing, forks hovering. Dennis's hand closed around my arm, firm, embarrassed. Get up, he hissed. You're making a scene. He pulled, and I stood, lightheaded. Joyce's mouth was a straight line. This is your sister's night, she said, each word ironed flat. You're ruining it. Go home, Arden. Gina's nails pressed crescents into my forearm as she steered me toward the door. You're embarrassing yourself. The letter slipped from my fingers and skated under somebody's heels. Someone laughed again, smaller this time, like they weren't sure it was safe. I let myself be moved, like a prop rolled to the wings. The music surged back as the door opened. Warm air met night air. The yard smelled like pepper and spilled champagne. The string lights hummed. On the porch, the man from the bar had come outside and was watching the house with the expression of someone counting exits. He met my eyes briefly, almost kindly, then looked away. Joyce's voice floated after me from inside, the hospitality smile stitched back into place. Enjoy yourselves, everyone. Eat, please. There was a catch in it I would not listen to. I walked to my car. The engine noise felt like a hand on my back, steadying. My phone buzzed once, a text from Joyce. We'll talk later. I stared at it until the words blurred and then resolved, a promise or a threat, or simply a placeholder for nothing. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the house with the lights and the music and the guests who wanted to keep their plates clean. I didn't know where I was going until the turn put me on Gavin Street, a muscle memory older than pride. His porch light was on. He opened the door before I knocked, like he'd been listening for my car. Arden? He said, and I folded against him, ribs and breath and the quiet percussion of his heart. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't look. I could feel the future breathing down my neck, and for once, it sounded like a person who would stay. Gavin didn't ask right away. He just held me while I trembled, until the tension in my arms turned to silence. Then, quietly, what did they say? I told him. Every word of it. The wedding, the laughter, the letter trampled under their shoes. When I reached the part about kneeling, my voice broke. He brushed my hair from my face, eyes steady, not pitying. Okay, he said finally. Then we find another way. I wanted to argue, to tell him there was no way. There was math, numbers that didn't move, but his tone didn't allow space for panic. He disappeared into the kitchen and came back with his laptop open, searching car listings. Gavin, no. He didn't look up. The truck's worth at least $50,000. That's your dad's truck. It was, he said softly. He'd have sold it himself if it meant keeping someone alive. I watched him photograph the dusty hood, his reflection bent in the metal. I remembered weekends spent driving through the Alabama hills, his hand on the wheel, sunlight leaking through pine trees. The idea that he'd trade that piece of his history for my future made something in me collapse and stand taller all at once. By morning, he'd found a buyer. 2 days later, the truck was gone, and $50,000 sat in our joint account. Halfway there, he said, forcing a smile. And I'm still coming to work tomorrow. At the lab, word spread faster than I expected. Carla, our quiet biochemist with the soft Mississippi drawl, pulled me into the storage room. You should have told us sooner, she said, eyes glistening. That afternoon, she launched a crowdfunding page with a title I couldn't read without crying, For Arden's Second Chance. Gavin spoke to the team during our Monday meeting, voice unsteady for once. She's been there for every deadline, every failure, every late-night experiment. She's family. Let's do for her what she's always done for us. They did. The first day brought in $8,000. By the end of the week, $27,000. By the second week, $35,000. Small amounts from people who didn't have much. A lab assistant donated her overtime pay. A senior scientist convinced his old research group to pitch in. Even one of our competitors sent $2,000 with a note, "Because the world needs people like you in it." And then there was the anonymous donor, $5,000, wired under a name that meant nothing. Attached, a message. For the one who keeps going. It arrived at midnight. I stared at the email header, some small suspicion threading through me. Gavin thought maybe it was an alum from the university. I wasn't sure. But something about the phrasing, simple, formal, felt oddly familiar. Still, it wasn't enough. 65,000 wasn't 100. The hospital deadline sat on my nightstand like a loaded clock. So I opened drawers and started to sell the pieces of my life. My high-end laptop, gone for $5,000. My microscope lenses, listed. Then the small velvet box I had avoided opening for years, my grandmother's pearl necklace. I remembered her fastening it around my neck before my first presentation in grad school. "Don't be afraid to take up space," she'd said. I sold it to a quiet man at a pawn shop for $7,000. He wrapped it in brown paper, careful as if it were still sacred. A few other pieces of jewelry added another $3,000. Gavin tried to stop me. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way," I said, pressing the bills into his hand. "This is my contribution." By the end of the month, the account read $100,000 even. Every dollar bought with faith, kindness, or memory. The hospital called the next morning. "We have a donor match," the coordinator said. My throat closed. "When?" "Next week." Gavin exhaled so hard I thought he'd been holding that breath for days. That night, we sat on the balcony outside my apartment, cheap takeout cooling between us. Streetlights turned the city gold and strange. "Do you ever think about forgiving them?" he asked suddenly. "I can't even think about them," I said. "Not yet." He nodded. "Then think about what comes after." "I don't know what that looks like." "Life," he said. "Just life." I smiled, small and shaky. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, wrapping his arm around me. "But it's possible." The night air smelled like rain and fried food from the diner below. Somewhere, a freight train moaned. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something that could either be salvation or surrender. 1 week later, I was in a hospital gown, watching a nurse mark my arm with a purple pen. Gavin stood at my bedside, pretending to be calm. "You'll dream about bad hospital food," he said. "I'll dream about barbecue," I muttered. "Real ribs." He smiled, eyes glassy. "Then that's what I'll bring when you wake up." As they wheeled me towards surgery, the ceiling lights flickered past like slow applause. I wasn't sure if I'd wake up, or who I'd be if I did, but I knew this much. I wasn't alone anymore. Somewhere deep inside, the pulse of something new began to form, faint but insistent, the rhythm of another chance. The world came back in fragments, sound first, then light. A nurse's voice floated somewhere above me, vitals stable. Then Gavin's hand, warm and shaking slightly, found mine. "Hey, hey," he whispered, relief cracking through his voice. "You're here." I tried to speak, but only air came out. My throat burned, my body felt borrowed, but the monitor beside me beeped, steady, strong. That sound, steady life, was the most beautiful rhythm I'd ever heard. Days blurred into nights, the hospital ceiling becoming my sky. Gavin refused to leave. He slept in the stiff chair by my bed, drooling on paperwork from the lab. Sometimes, when the morphine fog lifted, I'd find him watching me with that quiet intensity of someone counting blessings and fears in the same breath. 2 weeks later, I could stand. A month later, I could walk without help. The first time sunlight hit my skin outside the hospital doors, it felt like stepping into a different dimension of living. We went home. Home, my modest Birmingham apartment, filled with takeout boxes, medical bills, and Gavin's ridiculous attempts at soup. He checked my vitals every hour like a rookie nurse. Carla visited with a stack of flowers from the lab. "You're officially on medical leave, she said, hugging me. "And unofficially, we miss you like hell." Recovery was brutal but beautiful. I learned the rhythm of my new body, the foreign heartbeat of the kidney that didn't start as mine but decided to stay. Each scar was a signature of survival. But survival wasn't enough. Late one night, the machines quiet, I looked around the apartment and felt a fierce clarity burning under my ribs. "This can't be it," I said. Gavin looked up from the couch. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this happened for something. I don't want to just live. I want it to matter." He smiled, exhausted but intrigued. matter how. Diagnostics, early detection, so no one else has to beg for help the way I did. I pulled a napkin toward me, grabbed a pen, and started sketching. Sensors, enzymes, test arrays, the whole roadmap poured out in shaky ink. By the time the clock hit 3 a.m., we had the skeleton of a startup, Crowell Biotech. He leaned over the napkin. "You're serious." "Dead serious," I said, then grimaced at my word choice. He laughed softly. "Then we build it." We rented a tiny office downtown in Birmingham's Innovation District, a former photography studio with leaky pipes and flickering fluorescent lights. We couldn't afford furniture, so we scavenged desks from a liquidation sale and lab chairs from Craigslist. For 6 months, we lived on caffeine, instant noodles, and stubborn hope. I spent nights testing prototype circuits for a handheld kidney failure detector. Gavin chased suppliers, investors, and the endless paperwork that comes with dreams. Some nights, I'd wake to find him asleep at his desk, a half-empty coffee cup in hand. I'd drape a blanket over his shoulders and think about the night I'd knelt on my parents' polished floor. That humiliation had cracked something open in me, not weakness, but space for something tougher to grow. At the 6-month mark, Carla quit her comfortable job at our old lab and joined us full-time. "You saved my faith in science," she said simply. "Let's save someone else's life now." We kept pushing. One local hospital agreed to run trials on our prototype. The results were promising, early detection up to 3 months before symptoms. Word spread quietly at first, then loud enough to reach Atlanta. A major medical conglomerate contacted us. A video call. Their CEO, a woman with an expression like polished glass, listened as I presented the data. Gavin squeezed my knee under the table every time my voice trembled. After an hour of questions, she smiled. "We want exclusive rights," she said. "Global distribution, $3 million up front." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Gavin grabbed my hand, both of us silent, stunned. When I signed the contract 2 weeks later, I felt something shift, like the world, for once, tilted in my favor. Afterward, in the quiet of our office, Gavin brought out a small paper box. Inside was a new watch. Simple, elegant, nothing flashy. "To mark time," he said, the moment it all changed. I ran my fingers over the glass, the soft ticking inside it. Time. The thing I almost lost, now turning in my hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching Birmingham's skyline glow faintly, and thought about the silence that had followed my parents' rejection. It wasn't just cruelty, it was erasure. They had chosen a narrative where I didn't exist. Now I was about to tell mine. Gavin stirred awake on the couch. "What's on your mind?" "There's a podcast," I said slowly. "True Stories Uncovered. They feature real accounts. People who survived betrayal, loss." "You're thinking of telling it?" I nodded. "Not for revenge, for truth." He sat up, eyes shadowed but kind. "If you're sure, I'll stand behind you." I smiled faintly. "You already have." The next morning, I emailed the producer. By that evening, I had a slot scheduled for recording. When I walked into that small studio a week later, the microphone gleaming beneath the soft light, my heart raced like the first time I'd held a scalpel. I leaned in, took a breath, and began. "My name is Arden Crowell, and 2 years ago, my parents chose a wedding over my life." The producer didn't interrupt once. She just listened, eyes steady, hands folded, as I laid it all bare. The clinic results, the $100,000 bill, the laughter, the polished floor. Every detail that had turned home into a foreign country. When I finished, the silence in that little soundproof room felt heavier than applause. She said quietly, "Thank you for trusting me," then clicked stop on the recorder. The episode aired 3 weeks later. At first it was a small thing, a few hundred plays, comments from strangers saying they cried. Then someone clipped a minute-long excerpt where my voice cracked. As I said, "They chose a party over my life." It hit social media, and the number climbed past 1 million overnight. Within days, Hatch Justice for Arden trended. My inbox filled with stories. A nurse whose parents cut her off after she chose her career, a man who sold his house for his brother's surgery only to be forgotten later. They all said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. At the lab, Carla printed the comments and taped them to the break room wall. "Fuel," she said. "Every word of this is fuel." Gavin watched me read them, his expression a mix of pride and worry. "You've started something," he murmured. "Just be ready for what it shakes loose." What it shook loose began in whispers. The restaurants, Dennis and Joyce's empire, started seeing empty tables. Then reviews appeared under their business listings. Family first, ask the daughter they left behind. Good ribs, bad morals. Within a month, local papers picked up the story, connecting the podcast to them. Joyce tried damage control, issuing statements about misunderstandings and private matters. But the harder she pushed, the faster the tide turned. I didn't gloat. I didn't even comment. I just watched it all unfold from our office window, smoke from their downtown location curling into the gray Birmingham sky. Meanwhile, the company thrived. Hospitals requested demos. Investors called nonstop. We hired 3 more researchers, rented a larger workspace, upgraded equipment. On the day we unpacked the new centrifuge, Gavin handed me a small card. Inside, a single sentence. You kept going. But not all the echoes were kind. Late at night, I'd check my messages and find one number calling over and over. No voicemail, no text. The same number I'd deleted a year earlier. One night I finally answered. Silence. Then a voice I hadn't heard since the hospital recovery room. Arden, it's Mom. I almost hung up. She spoke quickly, words tumbling. Please don't hang up. Your father, we've lost almost everything. The restaurants, the house, the investors, they've all pulled out. We just need time. We need... The sound of her crying filled the space between us. A year ago, it would have broken me. Now it felt like listening to weather from a city I'd moved away from. Mom, I said, each word careful, deliberate, you made your choices. We didn't understand. You understood perfectly, I cut in. You just didn't care until it cost you something. Another voice entered the line. My father's, rough, strained. Arden, please. The house. We're about to lose it. $150,000 would keep us afloat until... I closed my eyes. The number stung. Familiar, symmetrical, the same way mine once had. Do you realize, I said quietly, that's $50,000 more than the price of my life? No one answered, just breathing. 2 people who had taught me silence as a language. I'll think about it, I said finally and hung up. Gavin was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. They want money, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. $150,000. He exhaled. You don't owe them anything. I know, I said, but my voice didn't sound sure, even to me. For days I couldn't focus, every document blurred into the same word. Family? I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want their faces living rent-free inside my head anymore. On the 4th morning, I wrote a check. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed to end the debt that had never been about money. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Quiet, neutral. They looked smaller somehow. Joyce's hands twisted in her lap. Dennis's suit hung loose. What do you want? I asked, keeping my voice level. Joyce's eyes darted to the check in my hand. Just a chance to start over, she whispered. You had that chance, I said. Every day I begged you to see me. That was a chance. Dennis leaned forward, the old salesman tone creeping back. We were wrong. We thought helping your sister was safer for business, I finished. Say it. He didn't deny it. I slid the check across the table. $150,000. Enough to buy you time, but it's the last thing you'll ever get from me. Joyce reached for my hand. I pulled back. Family, I repeated, standing, is who shows up when you're dying, not when they're broke. I left them sitting there, the check between their cups, steam rising like something faintly holy and already fading. Outside, the air was cool, the kind that tastes clean after rain. Gavin waited by the car. Did you give it to them? He asked. Yes, I said. For closure. Feel better? Not yet, I admitted, but I will. He nodded, sliding his fingers through mine as we walked. Behind us, the cafe bell chimed once, a soft, final note. Back at the office, the hum of machines filled the silence I hadn't realized I'd been carrying since that coffee shop. The centrifuge spun. Carlo laughed at something in the next room. For the first time in years, the sound didn't echo against guilt. You okay? Gavin asked, dropping 2 mugs of tea on my desk. I stared at the steam rising from mine. You ever notice how freedom doesn't feel loud? It's quiet, like after a storm. He smiled. Then I guess we've earned a little quiet. The next week slipped into something close to peace. Work thrived. Our new diagnostic tool rolled through final approval. Hospitals across the South placed orders. Emails poured in from researchers wanting to collaborate. For once, the inbox that used to bring bad news was full of life. Carla stopped by one morning, handing me a folder. Funding request for a patient assistance program, she said. We could allocate 1% of profits to transplant candidates who can't afford surgery. I flipped through the proposal. A map of names, hospitals, survival rates, every number a heartbeat waiting to happen. Gavin leaned on the doorframe, watching me read. You in? Absolutely, I said. But keep it anonymous. No press release, no interviews. Just do it. He nodded. Quiet good, I like that. At night, when the lab emptied and the city lights flickered through the glass, I'd stay behind. The whiteboard still had our old words scribbled across it in fading ink. Detect earlier, hurt fewer. I stood staring at them, marker in hand, then added 2 new words underneath. Choose better. It wasn't just about medicine anymore. It was about every decision. Who to trust, what to keep, what to let go of. A month later, a brown envelope arrived at the office with no return address. Inside was a small item wrapped in tissue paper. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the one I'd sold to save myself. There was a note in neat, formal handwriting. For the one who kept going. A friend. The anonymous donor. I held the pearls in my palm, the smooth weight of them, like time itself circling back. Whoever you are, I whispered, thank you. I didn't wear them right away. They went into my desk drawer beside the new watch Gavin had given me, both ticking reminders of what had been taken and what I'd taken back. Weeks passed. Spring folded over Birmingham. Our company expanded into a bigger floor downtown, walls glassed from floor to ceiling. From that height, I could see the edge of my parents' old restaurant, now shuttered, windows boarded. The sign still faintly read, Newman's Smokehouse, half the letters missing. I didn't feel triumph looking at it, just distance. That evening, as the sun dissolved into orange and steel, I opened my phone. There was a single unheard voicemail, dated 6 months back, from my mother. I'd never played it. Gavin looked up from his computer. You sure you want to? I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Maybe it's time. Her voice filled the room, uncertain, stripped of its practiced charm. Arden, I don't know how to start this. We were wrong. I was wrong. I thought doing things grand would keep the family together. I didn't see what it cost you until it was too late. A pause, then a shuddered breath. If you ever can, forgive me. Or at least, remember that I tried to call before everything fell apart. The message ended there. I sat for a long time, the quiet between us, alive with things that would never be said in person. Gavin reached over, covering my hand. You don't have to call back. I won't, I said, but I can still forgive her. For me, not for her. He smiled softly. That sounds like freedom talking. Outside, the city pulsed with light. Cranes, billboards, street lamps, all of it humming like the circuitry we'd built our future on. I thought of the people who'd carried me through the worst. Carla with her savings, Gavin with his truck, the colleagues who'd become my family. The kindness that had rebuilt me, molecule by molecule. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a door you walked back through. It was a window you opened, just enough to let air in. A year later, our new product launched nationwide. The company tripled in size. Reporters wanted interviews, magazines wanted my face, but I kept saying no. Instead, I wrote a letter to the people who donated, supported, believed. It ended with the same words I told that podcast host. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands beside you when your world stops beating. That night, I walked through the lab one last time before heading home. The machines were off, the air humming with quiet purpose. I set the pearl necklace on the whiteboard tray, right under the words, choose better, and smiled. Then I turned off the lights. Outside, the skyline burned gold, the city alive, the future open. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by what I'd lost, only grateful for what I'd built. Because sometimes, to save your own life, you have to lose the people who taught you what dying feels like. And I did. I lived.